He crashed 3 cars. I got yelled at for scratching the bumper. My name is Sophia Williams, and I am 26 years old. The moment my father erupted in fury over a tiny scratch I accidentally made on the Honda's bumper, while my brother Tyler casually mentioned totaling his 3rd car this year, I realized that our family operated on a justice system so twisted it defied all logic. Before I tell you about the explosive confrontation that finally shattered my patience with years of impossible double standards, drop a like and subscribe to hear how one scratch became the catalyst that exposed decades of favoritism that had been poisoning our family dynamics. Growing up in the Chen household in Austin, Texas meant learning early that Tyler and I existed in parallel universes with completely different laws of physics when it came to consequences and accountability. My parents, David and Linda Chen, had somehow created a system where Tyler's catastrophic failures were met with understanding and financial bailouts, while my minor mistakes triggered lectures about responsibility that could last for hours. The automotive double standard began when we were teenagers and first started driving. Tyler received his license 3 months before his 16th birthday through an expensive driving school that offered accelerated programs for students who could demonstrate basic competency. The early license was justified as necessary preparation for his busy schedule of basketball practice and part-time work at our uncle's restaurant. My driving education, by contrast, was delayed until 6 months after my 16th birthday because my parents wanted to ensure I was emotionally mature enough to handle the responsibility of operating a motor vehicle safely. The delay was presented as concern for my development rather than acknowledgement that Tyler's privileges consistently exceeded mine, despite his demonstrated lack of judgment in virtually every area of life. Tyler's first car was a nearly new Honda Civic that my parents purchased specifically for his use, complete with comprehensive insurance coverage and a maintenance plan that eliminated his responsibility for oil changes or routine upkeep. The vehicle represented a significant financial investment that reflected their confidence in his ability to care for expensive property responsibly. When my turn came to start driving, I inherited my mother's 8-year-old Toyota Corolla with over 150,000 miles and a history of mechanical problems that required constant attention and frequent repairs. The car came with basic liability insurance and the understanding that any maintenance costs beyond routine oil changes would be my responsibility to fund through part-time employment. The difference in our automotive situations was immediately apparent to anyone who observed our family dynamics, but my parents maintained that the arrangements were based on individual needs and circumstances, rather than favoritism. Tyler needed reliable transportation for his job and basketball commitments, while my schedule was less demanding and could accommodate occasional mechanical difficulties. Within 6 months of receiving his license and new car, Tyler had his first accident when he ran a red light while texting and collided with another vehicle in an intersection near our high school. The impact was severe enough to deploy airbags and require both vehicles to be towed from the scene, with Tyler's Honda sustaining damage that exceeded $8,000 in repair costs. My parents' response to Tyler's first accident was remarkably calm and understanding. They expressed relief that nobody had been seriously injured and praised Tyler for immediately calling them from the scene, instead of trying to handle the situation independently. The insurance claim was filed without discussion of consequences or changes to Tyler's driving privileges. The repair process took 3 weeks, during which my parents arranged for Tyler to drive my mother's car to maintain his transportation independence. Meanwhile, I continued using the aging Toyota, despite increasing concerns about its reliability and safety features that seemed inadequate compared to the vehicles my friends drove to school. Tyler's second accident occurred 8 months later, when he lost control of his newly repaired Honda during a rainstorm and slid into a concrete barrier on Highway 35. The impact crushed the front end completely and deployed airbags again, requiring the vehicle to be declared a total loss by insurance adjusters who determined repair costs exceeded the car's current value. The total loss of Tyler's first car prompted immediate action from my parents to ensure his transportation needs remained uninterrupted. Within 4 days of the accident, they had located and purchased a replacement vehicle, a 2-year-old Honda Accord with lower mileage and additional safety features that cost nearly $25,000. The new car came with enhanced insurance coverage that included collision and comprehensive protection with minimal deductibles. My parents also enrolled Tyler in defensive driving courses designed to improve his skills and potentially reduce insurance premiums that had increased substantially following 2 major accidents within his first year of driving. During this same period, my ancient Toyota experienced a transmission failure that left me stranded in the school parking lot after classes ended. The repair estimate exceeded $4,000, which was more than the vehicle's total value according to multiple mechanics I consulted about possible solutions to my transportation crisis. Instead of helping with repairs or replacement, my parents suggested I consider taking the bus or arranging carpools with friends until I could save enough money to purchase a different vehicle independently. The contrast with Tyler's immediate replacement car highlighted the vast difference in how our transportation emergencies were prioritized and resolved. I spent the following 3 months working additional hours at my part-time job at Target while walking to school and borrowing rides from friends whenever possible. The experience was humiliating and exhausting, particularly during Austin's brutal summer heat that made walking long distances physically uncomfortable and occasionally dangerous. Eventually, I saved enough money to purchase a 12-year-old Ford Focus with questionable maintenance history and multiple cosmetic issues that affected its appearance, but supposedly did not impact safety or reliability. The car cost $3,000 and came with no warranty or guarantee beyond the seller's assurance that it had been running consistently for the previous 6 months. Tyler's defensive driving courses apparently had minimal impact on his actual driving behavior, because his third accident occurred just 5 months after receiving his replacement Honda Accord. This incident involved excessive speed on a residential street, where Tyler lost control while attempting to pass a slower vehicle and crashed into a parked pickup truck. The impact was severe enough to trigger airbag deployment for the third time in Tyler's brief driving career, and resulted in injuries that required emergency room treatment for both Tyler and the passenger in his vehicle. The Honda Accord was completely destroyed, with damage so extensive that insurance adjusters declared it a total loss without conducting detailed repair estimates. My parents' response to Tyler's third major accident within 18 months of driving was concerned, but remarkably free of anger or consequences that might have been expected, given the pattern of dangerous behavior his accidents demonstrated. Their primary focus was ensuring Tyler received appropriate medical treatment, and that insurance claims were processed efficiently to replace his destroyed vehicle. The third replacement car was actually an upgrade from Tyler's previous vehicles, a nearly new Honda Pilot SUV that my parents justified as necessary for improved safety, given Tyler's history of accidents. The larger vehicle offered enhanced crash protection and additional safety features that they hoped would prevent future injuries if Tyler continued having driving difficulties. The insurance premiums for Tyler's coverage had increased dramatically, following 3 major accidents, but my parents absorbed these costs without requiring Tyler to contribute financially or accept restrictions on his driving privileges. The expensive coverage was considered necessary protection for a young driver who had demonstrated consistent difficulty with vehicle operation. Meanwhile, my ancient Ford Focus was experiencing increasingly frequent breakdowns that required constant attention and repair costs that consumed most of my part-time income. The electrical system was particularly problematic, causing random failures of lights, radio, and air conditioning that made driving unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. When I asked my parents for help with repair costs or consideration of a more reliable replacement vehicle, they suggested I research car maintenance techniques online and learn to perform basic repairs myself as a valuable life skill. The contrast with Tyler's immediate replacements following his accidents was so obvious that commenting seemed unnecessary. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in March, when I was running late for my shift at Target due to another mechanical failure that had delayed my departure from campus. The Ford's alternator had begun making concerning noises that morning, and the battery warning light had been flickering intermittently throughout my commute to work. Rushing to park and clock in on time, I misjudged the distance between my car and the concrete barrier that marked the end of the parking space. The minor contact resulted in a scratch approximately 4 inches long on the rear bumper of my mother's silver Honda CR-V that she had been driving while Tyler used her previous car during his latest vehicle transition. The scratch was superficial and barely visible unless examined closely in direct sunlight. It did not penetrate through the paint to the metal beneath, and could have been easily repaired with touch-up paint that cost less than $20 at any auto parts store. The damage was so minor that most people would not have noticed it, without having the location specifically pointed out. However, when I mentioned the incident to my parents that evening during dinner, their reaction was immediate and disproportionate to the actual damage that had occurred. My father's voice rose to levels typically reserved for serious disciplinary situations, as he demanded detailed explanations about how such carelessness could have happened. "Sophia, this is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior that demonstrates why you're not ready for a better vehicle," he said, his tone suggesting that the minor scratch represented evidence of fundamental character flaws rather than an accident that could happen to any driver regardless of experience or skill level. "You need to understand that cars are expensive investments that require careful attention and respect for their value," my mother added, apparently forgetting that Tyler had destroyed 3 vehicles worth approximately $60,000 total, while I had caused damage that could be repaired for the cost of a dinner at a casual restaurant. The lecture continued for nearly an hour, covering topics that ranged from the importance of spatial awareness, while parking to broader discussions about personal responsibility and financial accountability that seemed completely disconnected from the reality of my minor mistake compared to Tyler's history of major accidents. Throughout this extended discussion of my supposedly irresponsible behavior, Tyler sat at the kitchen table working on homework, while occasionally smirking at my parents' dramatic response to damage that was barely visible to anyone, not specifically looking for evidence of contact with the concrete barrier. "Maybe Sophia shouldn't be driving until she learns to be more careful," Tyler suggested with barely concealed amusement. "Some people just aren't cut out for operating vehicles safely, and it's better to recognize that before somebody gets hurt." The suggestion that I should lose driving privileges over a minor scratch while Tyler continued driving, despite 3 totaled vehicles, revealed the complete absurdity of our family's approach to consequences and accountability. The double standard was so extreme that it seemed deliberately designed to favor Tyler regardless of the severity of his mistakes. "That's an excellent point," my father agreed immediately. "Perhaps restricting Sophia's driving until she demonstrates better judgment would help her develop the careful attention that vehicle operation requires." The threat to remove my driving privileges over superficial damage that could be repaired with minimal expense, while Tyler faced no consequences for destroying 3 cars worth tens of thousands of dollars, finally pushed my frustration beyond the breaking point that I had been approaching for years. "Are you seriously considering taking away my car over a scratch that will cost $20 to fix while Tyler has totaled 3 vehicles, and you just keep buying him new ones?" I asked, my voice rising to match the emotional intensity of this completely irrational family discussion. "Tyler's accidents were unfortunate incidents that could happen to any driver," my mother replied, apparently unable to recognize the logical inconsistency in her explanation. "Your scratch demonstrates carelessness that could have been prevented with proper attention to your surroundings. The distinction between Tyler's unfortunate incidents and my careless behavior highlighted the twisted reasoning that had characterized our family's approach to accountability throughout our childhood and teenage years. Tyler's failures were always attributed to external circumstances beyond his control, while my mistakes were evidence of personal shortcomings that required correction." "Unfortunate incidents?" I repeated incredulously. Tyler was texting while driving during his first accident, speeding during his second, and attempting dangerous passes during his third. Those weren't unfortunate incidents. They were the predictable results of reckless behavior that you've never addressed or corrected. The factual accuracy of my description of Tyler's accidents was undeniable, but my parents seemed uncomfortable with the direct comparison between his dangerous driving behaviors and my minor parking mistake that had caused no safety concerns and minimal financial impact. "Tyler has learned from his experiences and shown improvement in his driving habits," my father said, though no evidence supported this claim, given the progression from texting-related collision to speed-related crash to reckless passing attempt that had characterized his 3 accidents. "What improvement?" I demanded. "His accidents got progressively more dangerous, and each one was caused by different types of reckless behavior." "How is that learning from experience?" The question highlighted the complete absence of logic in their assessment of Tyler's driving record compared to their reaction to my minor scratch. They had created a narrative where his escalating dangerous behavior represented growth, while my single minor mistake demonstrated fundamental unfitness for vehicle operation. "Sophia, your tone is becoming disrespectful," my mother warned, apparently more concerned about my emotional response to their unfair treatment than about addressing the obvious inequality in how our driving mistakes were evaluated and consequences assigned. "My tone is becoming honest," I replied, finally abandoning the diplomatic approach that had failed to address years of differential treatment that had affected every aspect of our family relationships. The conversation was interrupted by Tyler's phone ringing with a call from his friend Marcus, whom he answered immediately despite the ongoing family discussion about driving responsibility and consequences. The casual way he took the call during our serious conversation demonstrated his confidence that the discussion would not result in any restrictions or consequences that might affect his immediate plans. "Hey, Marcus, what's up?" Tyler said cheerfully, apparently unconcerned that his interruption might be considered disrespectful given my mother's recent warning about appropriate behavior during family discussions. "Tyler, please finish your call later so we can complete this conversation about driving responsibility," my father said, though his tone was notably gentler than the harsh voice he had used when addressing my supposed carelessness and disrespectful attitude. "Just give me 2 minutes," Tyler replied, continuing his conversation with Marcus about plans for the weekend that apparently took priority over family discussions about the importance of careful vehicle operation and respect for expensive property. The contrast between my parents' tolerance for Tyler's interruption and their criticism of my emotional tone revealed the fundamental inequality that characterized all our family interactions. Tyler's behavior was consistently excused or minimized, while mine was scrutinized and criticized, regardless of the actual severity or impact of our respective actions. When Tyler finally ended his phone call, after nearly 5 minutes of casual conversation about weekend plans, the family discussion resumed with no acknowledgement that his interruption had been inappropriate or disrespectful, given the supposed importance of the topics we were addressing. "Now, where were we?" my father asked, apparently forgetting that we had been discussing the possibility of restricting my driving privileges over a minor scratch, while Tyler faced no consequences for 3 major accidents that had cost the family tens of thousands of dollars in vehicle replacements and insurance premiums. "We were discussing how a $20 scratch is somehow worse than $60,000 worth of totaled vehicles," I said, refusing to allow the conversation to continue without acknowledging the absurd double standard that had prompted this entire family meeting. "Sophia, the cost of damage is not the only factor we consider when evaluating driving responsibility," my mother said, apparently believing that this explanation justified their completely inconsistent approach to consequences and accountability. "What other factors?" I asked, because from my perspective, it looks like Tyler can destroy as many cars as he wants, while I get threatened with losing driving privileges over superficial damage that doesn't affect safety or functionality. The direct challenge to their reasoning prompted another exchange of glances between my parents that suggested they had not developed convincing explanations for the obvious favoritism that characterized their treatment of our respective driving records. "Tyler's situation is different because his accidents occurred during unavoidable circumstances that any driver might encounter," my father said, apparently forgetting that texting while driving, excessive speed, and dangerous passing maneuvers were choices rather than unavoidable circumstances. "Unavoidable circumstances?" I laughed bitterly. "Choosing to text while driving is an unavoidable circumstance? Deciding to speed during a rainstorm is unavoidable? Attempting to pass another car on a residential street is unavoidable?" Each example I cited demonstrated the voluntary nature of Tyler's dangerous behaviors that had caused his 3 accidents, undermining any attempt to characterize his crashes as unfortunate incidents beyond his control. "Tyler has shown maturity in how he handled the aftermath of his accidents," my mother offered, apparently searching for any distinction that might justify their differential treatment of our driving records. "What maturity?" I asked. "You handled all the insurance claims, bought all the replacement vehicles, and absorbed all the increased premium costs. Tyler never faced any consequences or took any responsibility for the financial impact of his accidents." The factual accuracy of my description was undeniable and highlighted the complete absence of accountability in Tyler's experience with 3 major vehicle accidents that should have resulted in significant consequences for someone his age. "We wanted to focus on the learning experience rather than punishment that might discourage him from continuing to drive," my father explained, revealing the protective approach they had taken toward Tyler's dangerous driving behaviors. "But you're ready to punish me by taking away my car over a scratch that will cost $20 to repair?" I pointed out. "How does that focus on learning rather than punishment?" The contradiction in their logic was so obvious that any attempt to explain it only highlighted the favoritism that had influenced their completely different approaches to our respective driving mistakes. The family discussion continued for another hour, with my parents offering various explanations and justifications for their differential treatment that became increasingly absurd as they tried to maintain that their approach was based on objective assessment rather than obvious favoritism toward Tyler. By the end of the conversation, the fundamental inequality in our family dynamics had been exposed in ways that could not be ignored or rationalized through creative explanations about different circumstances or individual needs. The scratch on the Honda's bumper became the symbol of everything wrong with our family's approach to fairness and accountability, representing years of accumulated frustration with double standards that had affected every aspect of our relationship with our parents and their expectations for our behavior. What happened next would change our family dynamics forever, and finally force a reckoning with the favoritism that had poisoned our relationships for years. What happened next would change our family dynamics forever, and finally force a reckoning with the favoritism that had poisoned our relationships for years. The conversation that evening revealed the depth of my parents' denial about their differential treatment, but it was what happened the following week that would finally shatter their ability to maintain the illusion of fairness. Tuesday morning brought news that would test every excuse my parents had created to justify Tyler's privileged status in our family hierarchy. Tyler called from the police station at 6:30 in the morning, his voice shaking as he explained that he had been arrested for driving under the influence after crashing his Honda Pilot into a mailbox in our neighborhood. The accident had occurred at 2 in the morning when Tyler was returning from a party where he had been drinking with friends. According to the police report, he had lost control of the SUV while attempting to navigate the curve near our house, mounting the sidewalk and destroying a neighbor's brick mailbox before coming to rest in their front yard. The Honda Pilot, Tyler's fourth vehicle in less than 2 years of driving, was severely damaged with front-end destruction that would likely result in another total loss. More seriously, Tyler's blood alcohol level measured .12, well above the legal limit for drivers of any age, and particularly problematic for someone under 21. My parents' response to this latest catastrophe was immediate mobilization to minimize consequences, rather than acknowledgement that Tyler's dangerous behavior had finally escalated to criminal activity that could have killed someone. Within hours, they had hired an expensive attorney and begun making calls to arrange bail and court representation. "This is just a mistake that got out of hand," my mother explained to relatives who called asking about Tyler's arrest. "Young people sometimes make poor decisions, but that doesn't mean they deserve to have their futures ruined by one night of bad judgment." The characterization of drunk driving as a simple mistake, rather than a serious crime that demonstrated Tyler's complete disregard for public safety, revealed how deeply their favoritism had distorted their ability to assess his behavior objectively. They seemed more concerned about protecting Tyler from consequences than acknowledging the danger he had posed to innocent people. Meanwhile, I was still facing potential loss of driving privileges over the $20 scratch that had prompted their concerns about my responsibility and judgment. The contrast between their protective response to Tyler's criminal behavior and their punitive reaction to my minor parking mistake was so extreme that it seemed designed to test my patience. "Are you still planning to restrict my driving over the scratch?" I asked during dinner the night after Tyler's arrest, curious whether recent events might have provided perspective on the relative severity of our respective driving incidents. "Tyler's situation is complicated by legal factors that don't apply to your parking incident," my father replied, apparently unable to recognize that drunk driving was significantly more serious than superficial bumper damage regardless of legal complications. "Legal factors?" I said incredulously. "You mean like the fact that Tyler committed a crime that could have killed someone while I caused cosmetic damage that affects nothing except appearance?" The comparison highlighted the absurd priorities that had characterized my parents' response to our different driving incidents. But they seemed determined to maintain their position that Tyler deserved protection, while I required consequences for supposedly irresponsible behavior. "Sophia, Tyler is facing serious legal consequences that will affect his future opportunities," my mother said, as though acknowledging Tyler's potential punishment somehow justified continuing their plans to restrict my driving privileges over the scratch. "What about the consequences for destroying 4 vehicles in less than 2 years?" I asked. "What about the consequences for endangering innocent people by driving drunk? Why do those behaviors deserve protection while my scratch requires punishment?" The questions forced my parents to confront the logical inconsistency in their approach to accountability, but they seemed unable to acknowledge that their differential treatment was based on favoritism, rather than objective assessment of our respective actions. The legal proceedings that followed Tyler's arrest revealed the extent of my parents' willingness to invest in protecting him from consequences, while maintaining their position that I needed restrictions to learn responsibility. They hired a lawyer who specialized in DUI defense, paying a $10,000 retainer to pursue strategies that might minimize Tyler's penalties. The attorney's approach involved challenging the traffic stop procedures, questioning the accuracy of breath testing equipment, and negotiating with prosecutors for reduced charges that would limit the impact on Tyler's permanent record. The comprehensive legal defense represented a significant financial investment that reflected my parents' determination to shield Tyler from meaningful consequences. During this same period, they continued insisting that I should accept restrictions on my driving privileges to demonstrate learning from my parking mistake. The contrast between Tyler's expensive legal protection and my expected punishment for minor damage highlighted the complete inequality in how our family approached accountability. We're investing in Tyler's legal defense because a DUI conviction could affect his college applications and future career opportunities, my father explained when I questioned the disparity in how our driving incidents were being handled. But restricting my driving won't affect my college applications or career opportunities? I asked, pointing out that their concern about Tyler's future seemed remarkably selective given their willingness to impose consequences on me for vastly less serious behavior. Your scratch doesn't involve criminal charges or permanent legal consequences, my mother replied, apparently believing that this distinction justified their completely different approaches to our respective situations. That's exactly my point, I said. Tyler's incident was criminal behavior that endangered lives, while mine was a minor accident that caused cosmetic damage. Why does the person who committed a crime deserve protection, while the person who made a minor mistake deserves punishment? The question highlighted the fundamental irrationality in their approach to family justice, but they seemed unable to recognize the obvious inconsistency in their reasoning or acknowledge the favoritism that influenced their differential treatment. Tyler's court appearances began 3 weeks after his arrest, with my parents attending every hearing to demonstrate family support for his defense strategy. They arranged their work schedules around court dates and consulted regularly with his attorney about strategies for minimizing penalties. The legal proceedings dominated family conversations for months, with detailed discussions about plea bargain options, community service requirements, and license suspension periods that might result from Tyler's conviction. Every aspect of his case received careful consideration and strategic planning designed to protect his future from the consequences of his criminal behavior. Meanwhile, my request to borrow my mother's car for a college interview was denied because they remained concerned about my responsibility following the scratch incident. The denial meant I had to arrange alternative transportation for an important academic opportunity, while they invested thousands of dollars protecting Tyler from consequences of criminal behavior. We think it's better for you to use public transportation until you've demonstrated improved judgment, my mother explained, when I asked why Tyler's drunk driving didn't disqualify him from vehicle access, while my scratch continued to raise concerns about my fitness for driving. Tyler drove drunk and destroyed his fourth car, but I'm the one who needs to demonstrate improved judgment? I asked, highlighting the complete absurdity of their assessment of our respective driving capabilities and moral character. Tyler's situation involves legal complications that require careful handling, my father said, apparently believing that legal consequences somehow made Tyler's behavior less problematic, rather than more serious than my minor parking mistake. The double standard became even more pronounced when Tyler's case was resolved through a plea agreement that reduced his charges in exchange for community service, probation, and completion of alcohol education programs. My parents celebrated the favorable outcome as evidence of successful legal strategy, rather than acknowledgement that Tyler had escaped serious consequences for dangerous criminal behavior. The attorney did an excellent job protecting Tyler's future opportunities, my mother announced during dinner the night after his final court appearance. This outcome won't prevent him from attending college or pursuing the career he wants. The celebration of Tyler's minimal consequences for drunk driving, while they maintained restrictions on my vehicle access over a cosmetic scratch, finally pushed my frustration beyond any reasonable limit. The favoritism had reached levels that seemed deliberately designed to test my patience and tolerance for unfair treatment. So, Tyler gets to keep driving after committing a crime, but I'm still restricted because of a scratch? I asked, making one final attempt to highlight the complete irrationality of their approach to family accountability. Tyler has learned from his experience and will be more careful in the future, my father replied, apparently believing that completing court-ordered programs somehow demonstrated personal growth that my scratch incident had not provided. What exactly has Tyler learned? I demanded. That he can drive drunk, destroy property, and face minimal consequences as long as you hire expensive lawyers to protect him. How does that teach responsibility? The question forced my parents to confront the reality that their protective approach had actually prevented Tyler from experiencing meaningful consequences that might have encouraged genuine behavior change or personal growth. Tyler understands that his behavior was inappropriate and won't repeat these mistakes, my mother said, though no evidence supported this optimistic assessment of his character development or commitment to improved decision-making. Based on what evidence? I asked. His 3 previous accidents were also supposed to be learning experiences, but each one was worse than the last. Now he's progressed to criminal behavior, but somehow this time is different. The pattern of escalating dangerous behavior that had characterized Tyler's driving record undermined any claim that he had learned from previous experiences or would modify his approach to vehicle operation and decision-making. This conversation is becoming unproductive, my father announced, apparently uncomfortable with direct challenges to their reasoning about Tyler's character and prospects for behavioral improvement. This conversation is becoming honest, I replied, echoing my response from the previous week when they had criticized my tone, rather than addressing the substance of my concerns about their differential treatment. The family meeting that followed revealed my parents' complete inability to acknowledge the favoritism that had influenced every aspect of their treatment of Tyler and me throughout our lives. They proposed various compromises designed to restore my driving privileges while preserving the narrative that Tyler's situation was fundamentally different from mine due to circumstances beyond his control. The proposals included graduated restrictions, additional supervision, and proof of improved judgment that would allow me to regain vehicle access. However, none of their suggestions included acknowledgement that Tyler's drunk driving was more serious than my parking scratch or recognition that their differential treatment had been based on favoritism rather than objective assessment. We're willing to reconsider your driving restrictions if you can demonstrate improved attention to detail and respect for property, my mother offered, apparently believing that this compromise addressed my concerns about fairness and consistency in family consequences. Will Tyler face any additional restrictions based on his drunk driving conviction? I asked, testing whether their willingness to modify my situation extended to reconsidering Tyler's privileged status following his criminal behavior. Tyler's situation is already being handled through the legal system and court-ordered programs, my father replied, avoiding direct acknowledgement that Tyler would continue enjoying unrestricted access to family vehicles despite his criminal conviction. So the answer is no, I said, clarifying that their proposed compromise involved imposing conditions on my driving, while Tyler faced no additional family consequences for behavior that was infinitely more serious than my minor parking mistake. The negotiation revealed that my parents were willing to adjust restrictions on me, but unwilling to acknowledge that Tyler's behavior warranted similar or greater limitations on his vehicle access. The asymmetry confirmed that their approach was based on maintaining Tyler's privileges rather than objective assessment of driving responsibility. After weeks of family discussions about appropriate consequences and behavioral expectations, I realized that my parents were fundamentally unable to acknowledge the favoritism that had influenced their treatment of Tyler and me throughout our childhood and teenage years. Their investment in protecting Tyler from consequences while imposing restrictions on me had become so complete that they could not recognize the obvious inequality in their approach or consider modifications that might restore some semblance of fairness to family accountability. The final breaking point came when Tyler, emboldened by his successful avoidance of serious consequences for drunk driving, suggested that my continued focus on the scratch incident demonstrated immaturity and inability to accept responsibility for my mistakes. Maybe Sophia would benefit from some of the counseling programs I completed, Tyler said during dinner, apparently believing that his court-ordered education qualified him to offer advice about personal growth and responsibility. Those programs were designed for people who drive drunk and endanger innocent lives, I replied, highlighting the absurdity of Tyler's suggestion that I needed intervention for causing cosmetic damage that could be repaired for $20. The programs teach valuable lessons about decision-making and accepting responsibility that could benefit anyone, Tyler continued, apparently oblivious to the irony of suggesting that I needed education about responsibility, while he had just avoided serious consequences for criminal behavior. What lessons about responsibility? I asked. You've destroyed 4 cars, committed a crime, and faced minimal consequences because mom and dad protected you from accountability. What exactly have you learned about responsibility? The direct challenge to Tyler's claimed personal growth forced him to acknowledge that his experience with consequences had been largely theoretical due to my parents' consistent intervention on his behalf. I've learned that mistakes have consequences and that I need to make better decisions in the future, Tyler said, though his continued access to family vehicles suggested that he had not experienced meaningful consequences that might motivate actual behavior change. What consequences? I laughed. You got expensive legal representation, minimal penalties, and kept all your driving privileges while I'm restricted over a scratch. Where exactly are these consequences you've learned from? The question highlighted the complete absence of accountability in Tyler's experience, despite his criminal conviction and pattern of dangerous driving behavior that had endangered innocent people and cost our family tens of thousands of dollars. That evening, I made the decision that would finally prioritize my own well-being over family relationships that had consistently demonstrated that fairness and equality were less important than maintaining Tyler's privileged status, regardless of his behavior or its consequences. I announced that I would be moving out of the family home and establishing independence from parents who had proven unable to treat their children equitably or acknowledge obvious favoritism that had poisoned our relationships for years. The decision was met with shock and attempts at negotiation, but I had finally recognized that my parents were fundamentally committed to protecting Tyler from consequences while holding me to standards that he would never face regardless of the severity of his mistakes. Sophia, you're overreacting to a temporary situation, my mother said, apparently believing that my decision to leave was an emotional response rather than a logical conclusion, based on years of differential treatment that would never change. Temporary? I asked. Tyler has been getting special treatment his entire life, and it's only gotten worse as his behavior has become more dangerous. This isn't temporary. It's a permanent family dynamic that will never change. My father attempted to offer compromises that would address my immediate concerns, while preserving the fundamental inequality that characterized our family relationships. We can work out a fair arrangement for driving privileges that takes everyone's situation into account. Fair arrangement? I said. Tyler drives drunk and keeps his car. I make a scratch and lose driving privileges. What possible arrangement could make that fair? The question highlighted the impossibility of creating fairness within a system fundamentally designed to benefit Tyler, regardless of objective evidence about behavior and responsibility. The months that followed my departure from the family home brought unexpected revelations about the extent of my parents' financial support for Tyler that went far beyond vehicle replacements and legal fees. Through conversations with extended family members who assumed I was aware of various arrangements, I learned that Tyler had been receiving monthly allowances, credit card payments, and educational funding that had never been offered to me. My Aunt Carol mentioned casually during a phone call that she admired my parents' generosity in paying Tyler's college tuition while he focused on his studies without the burden of student loans. The revelation that Tyler was attending university debt-free while I had accumulated substantial educational loans despite better grades and academic achievements added another layer of financial favoritism to an already unfair situation. I thought you knew about Tyler's tuition arrangement, my aunt said when she realized I was unaware of this additional financial support. Your parents have been covering all his educational expenses since he started college. The information confirmed that my parents' differential treatment extended far beyond driving incidents to encompass every aspect of our financial support and future opportunities. Tyler's education was being funded completely, while I had been encouraged to view student loans as character-building experiences that would teach me the value of hard work. 6 months after leaving home, I received a call from my mother asking if I would consider returning for Tyler's college graduation ceremony. The request came with explanations about family unity and the importance of celebrating Tyler's achievement, despite our recent difficulties. We know there have been some disagreements about fairness, my mother said, apparently viewing years of systematic favoritism as minor disagreements rather than fundamental betrayals of parental responsibility. Some disagreements? I replied. Tyler drives drunk and gets legal protection. I make a scratch and lose driving privileges. Tyler gets free college tuition while I accumulate debt. Those aren't disagreements. Those are patterns of favoritism that will never change. The conversation ended with my mother's disappointment that I could not move past our family difficulties to celebrate Tyler's success. The request revealed that my parents still viewed the problem as my inability to accept differential treatment, rather than their inability to treat their children fairly. Tyler's graduation ceremony proceeded without my attendance, marking the first major family milestone I had missed since establishing independence from relationships that consistently demonstrated that my well-being was less important than preserving Tyler's advantages. The experience taught me that some family relationships are built on inequality that serves the interests of favored members, while systematically disadvantaging others who will never receive equal treatment, regardless of their behavior or achievements. Today, I maintain minimal contact with family members who continue to view Tyler's drunk driving as a learning experience, while treating my parking scratch as evidence of character flaws that required intervention. The distance has allowed me to develop relationships based on mutual respect and fairness, rather than predetermined hierarchies that favor some people over others. The most important lesson I learned is that accepting unfair treatment in the name of family loyalty ultimately serves no one's interests except those who benefit from preferential status. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who consistently demonstrate that your worth is negotiable, while others receive unconditional support. What about you? Have you ever experienced family double standards that seem designed to favor one person over another, regardless of objective evidence about behavior and responsibility? How did you handle the inequality, and what changes did you make to protect your own interests? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics and the importance of recognizing when fairness matters more than maintaining relationships that consistently undervalue your worth.